Hey guys, tonight we're going to step off the edge of the world we know into an alternate timeline where humanity's destiny was not written in the dust, but in the wind. Imagine, we are 3 million years in the past, perched on a narrow cliff ledge in East Africa's Great Rift Valley. The air is thin and crisp. Below you, the savanna sprawls out, a world of rustling grass, acacia trees, and lethal predators. It's a world you've left behind. Above you, there is only a vast, silent, and terrifyingly empty ocean of blue. This is the moment history forks, where one terrified branch of our family tree gambled everything on leaving the ground forever. From this precarious ledge, you will follow a lineage of early hominins as they pay a terrible biological price for an impossible gift. You'll feel their bones hollow out, their chests warp to anchor muscles powerful enough to challenge gravity. You will watch as this single radical change rewrites everything that is to come. We will see them build cliffside nests instead of huts, hunt on the wing in the Stone Age, forge empires not along rivers but across mountain peaks, and eventually blot out the sun with cities that literally scrape the clouds. So what would it truly mean to be human if our defining trait was flight? Would the sky be a realm of ultimate freedom, or the most beautiful and unforgiving prison ever conceived? Thanks to the principles of evolutionary biology and a healthy dose of speculative history, tonight we will take flight in this alternate timeline together to find the answers. Frankly, if you were dropped onto that ledge without wings, you wouldn't survive long enough to even appreciate the view. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. That small click sends a big signal to the algorithm. That long-form, serious educational content still matters. And to me, it's an incredibly meaningful show of support. Thank you so much for helping keep this channel going strong. It always fascinates me to see where you're all tuning in from. Let me know in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story begins not with a choice, but with sheer terror. You are a member of a small band of Australopithecus afarensis, the same species as the famous fossil Lucy, who in our timeline was a crucial link in the chain to humanity. But here, your world is a nightmare of teeth and claws. The plains are ruled by predators like Dinophilis, a saber-toothed cat that hunts in packs. Survival on the ground is a losing game. While most of your kind remain on the plains, trying to outwit and outrun the danger, your small, desperate splinter group has been pushed into the only refuge you can find: the sheer, rocky cliffs of the Valley Escarpment. It's a vertical world of jagged rock and howling winds, and it becomes your sanctuary and your prison. The change doesn't happen overnight. There is no single magical mutation. Instead, it's a brutal attritional process stretching across 100,000 years of fear. Evolution is a tinkerer, not a grand designer, and it works with what it has. Paleoanthropologists still argue whether the main driver for bipedalism in our timeline was to free up the hands for tool use or simply for more energy-efficient locomotion. In your timeline, that debate is irrelevant. The only pressure is up. Individuals born with slightly less dense bones are a little lighter. Those with stronger pectoral muscles can scramble up rock faces a little faster. Those with a slightly more efficient respiratory system can handle the thinner air of the high cliffs. These are the ones who survive to pass on their genes. Everyone else ends up as a meal for the horrors below. Over countless generations, these subtle advantages accumulate. A key genetic cascade begins, centered on a mutation not unlike one that affects the LRP5 gene in modern humans, which helps regulate bone density. In your ancestors, the gene's function is slowly reversed, actively promoting porosity. Your bones are becoming a marvel of biological engineering, a hollow lattice of calcium and air, incredibly light but dangerously brittle. At the same time, your entire torso begins to reshape itself. Your sternum broadens and deepens, pushing outward to form a sharp, blade-like keel of bone, an anchor point for the new colossal muscles wrapping around your chest. These are your flight muscles, your biological engine, and they burn calories with terrifying inefficiency. Your arms, once used for climbing and carrying, are now becoming something else entirely. The fingers of your hands, the thumb remaining short and useful for grasping, are elongating with each passing generation, stretching into terrifyingly long, thin spars. A membrane of skin, rich with blood vessels and muscle fibers, stretches between them and connects down to your ankle. This is the patagium, a living sail of flesh and sinew. This isn't the elegant feather of a bird, it's the leathery, functional, and slightly monstrous wing of a bat. To lift a body of your size and weight, your wingspan must be immense, stretching 15, maybe 20 feet from tip to tip when fully extended. You are becoming a creature of impossible proportions. And to power it all, the most profound change happens inside your chest. Your simple mammalian bag lungs are replaced by something far more sophisticated, a design stolen from the birds. It's a system of air sacs that allows air to flow in one continuous loop, meaning your blood is being oxygenated during both inhalation and exhalation. It is the only reason your massive flight muscles don't fail, the only way to meet the ravenous metabolic demands of powered flight at high altitude. You are no longer just a hominin who climbs well. You are becoming Homo alatus, winged human, and the cost of this gift is a body remade by the singular, tyrannical demands of the sky. This new body, this miracle of adaptation, comes with a set of brutally harsh terms and conditions. The first and most relentless of these is the tyranny of metabolism. Your avian respiratory system and the colossal muscles attached to your keel are a biological furnace, and that furnace demands constant, high-energy fuel. Think of a hummingbird in our world, a creature whose heart can beat over 1,000 times a minute, a creature that must consume its own body weight in nectar each day just to stave off starvation. You are now that hummingbird, scaled up to the size of a hominin. Modern biomechanists in this alternate world still debate the exact caloric cost of early alatus flight, but they all agree on the conclusion. Your life is no longer measured in days or years, but in the hours until your next meal. This metabolic prison forces a complete revolution in your diet. Your ground-dwelling cousins, hominins like Paranthropus boisei or Nutcracker Man, were developing enormous molars and powerful jaw muscles for grinding tough, fibrous tubers and roots. In our timeline, that was a successful strategy for millions of years. But for you, it's a death sentence. You can't afford to spend hours digging for a low-value root. You no longer have the jaw structure for it. Your teeth are becoming sharper, better for tearing flesh than for grinding plants. You have, by necessity, become a committed carnivore and an apex predator of the skies. Your entire existence is now a hunt for the most calorie-dense food sources you can find. The most reliable meal is an egg, a perfect package of fat and protein. You become a master thief, a silent shadow that glides into the nests of giant prehistoric eagles and condors to steal their young or their unhatched clutches. You hunt other, smaller flying creatures, snatching large bats out of the evening air. You learn to spot the swarms of giant, fat-rich insects that bloom after the rains. The world below, that sprawling green buffet of the savannah, is now a place you only visit out of utter desperation, because on the ground you are no longer the master. Your second weakness is the curse of gravity. The very anatomy that gives you freedom in the air makes you a clumsy, vulnerable creature on the earth. Your legs have atrophied slightly, no longer needing to be the powerful pistons of a bipedal runner. Your center of gravity has shifted upwards to accommodate your massive chest and wings. Your feet have changed, the toes elongating. Better for gripping a narrow rock ledge than for walking on flat ground. When you are forced to land, you don't stride. You waddle and hobble, your wings held awkwardly to your sides. In the world of the sky, you are an angel. In the world of the dirt, you are prey. This vulnerability is compounded by your third great weakness, your own skeleton. Those light, hollow, pneumatized bones that make flight possible are a constant liability. A simple slip on a wet landing, a misjudged gust of wind that pushes you into a cliff face. These aren't moments that lead to a painful but survivable injury. They lead to a sharp, sickening crack. A broken leg is a disaster, but a broken wing is a death sentence. There are no medics, no casts, no splints that can possibly set the complex, hollow bones of your wing to heal correctly. A wing that heals wrong is a wing that will never provide balanced lift again. And a creature that cannot fly cannot hunt. Starvation becomes a slow, inevitable certainty. Scholars in this timeline, in feuds as bitter as our own 19th century bone wars, fiercely debate the primary cause of early alatus mortality. Was it predation on the ground, or was it traumatic injury from flight itself? Finally, there is the weather. It is no longer a passive backdrop to your life. It is an active, malevolent force. A sudden thunderstorm isn't something you can shelter from. It's a terrifying maze of lightning and violent updrafts that can tear your flock apart. A strong headwind can exhaust you in minutes, forcing you to land in unfamiliar, dangerous territory. A sudden downdraft can pluck you from the sky and dash you against the rocks below. And perhaps most insidiously, a patch of freezing rain can coat your wing membranes in a layer of ice, destroying their aerodynamic properties and sending you into an uncontrollable spiral towards that lethal ground you fought so hard to escape. You have conquered the sky, but you are utterly at its mercy. Living your entire life on a vertical plane, suspended between the solid earth and the empty sky, doesn't just reshape your body, it completely rewires your mind. Your brain, the same 3-pound lump of fatty tissue as your ground-dwelling cousins, is being sculpted by a profoundly different set of sensory inputs. Neuroscientists in this timeline can point to the physical evidence in the fossilized skulls of your ancestors. A noticeable expansion of the parietal lobe, the region of the brain responsible for the visuospatial processing. For a ground dweller, this part of the brain is busy creating a two-dimensional map of the landscape. Where is the river? Where is the predator hiding in the grass? But for you, the world isn't a map. It's a dynamic, three-dimensional sphere of perception. Navigation is not a conscious act of memorizing landmarks. It's an intuitive, full-body experience. You don't just see the wind, You feel its texture on your wing membranes. You learn to read the subtle language of the clouds, the puffy cumulus that signals a rising column of warm air, a thermal updraft you can ride to gain altitude without a single flap, saving precious energy. You can sense the shear, the invisible boundary where two air masses of different temperatures meet, creating turbulence. In our world, the Piraha people of the Amazon have a language that famously lacks words for numbers or colors, a quirk that has fueled endless debate among linguists about the relationship between language and thought. Your language is being shaped by similar environmental pressures, but in a completely different dimension. Your vocabulary explodes with a richness of expression for which we have no equivalent. You have dozens of specific words for different types of wind. A word for the steady, predictable morning updraft along a sun-facing cliff. Another for the treacherous, swirling rota that forms on the lee side of a peak. And a soft, poetic term for the gentle, high-altitude current that promises a smooth journey. Direction is no longer a flat compass of north, south, east, and west. Your directional sense is vectorial, incorporating a precise up and down. You might tell a flockmate to meet you 100 flaps below the sun-warmed ridge, and they will understand the location with perfect instinctive clarity. You are thinking in a way no ground-based human ever could. This three-dimensional existence shapes your most fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality. Your gods are not earth gods, they are gods of the atmosphere. The sun is a blazing, life-giving deity that you can physically fly towards, a being whose warmth you feel directly on your wings. The moon is the silent, silver guide who lights your way on moonlit hunts. The stars are the campfires of the ancestors, a comforting map in the inky blackness. Weather is the direct expression of divine emotion. A gentle rain is a blessing, a gift of water. A violent thunderstorm is the unmistakable fury of a sky god, a terrifying personal rage directed at you. And just as the sky becomes your heaven, the ground becomes your hell. It is the underworld, a place of decay and darkness, populated by clumsy, flightless things. The concept of being buried in the earth is a horror beyond imagining, a damnation of the soul. Your mythology is filled with cautionary tales of arrogant flyers who flew too close to the ground and were dragged down by malevolent spirits of the dirt. This isn't just a story. It's a core tenet of your worldview that reinforces the most important social rule. Stay in the air. The constant shared danger forges a social bond that is absolute and unbreakable. The individual is fragile, but the flock is strong. The intense cooperation required for survival overrides petty squabbles. You rely on your flockmates for everything. You hunt together in coordinated aerial ballets. You depend on the sharp eyes of others to spot predators from above and below. When it's time to rest in the communal eyrie, some individuals will always remain awake, perched as sentinels, their heads scanning the sky. This interdependence is most apparent when raising the young. Keeping a helpless, flightless infant safe on a narrow cliff ledge is a full-time job for the entire community. The flock is not just a family. It is a single, multi-winged organism, and your survival depends entirely on your place within it. This single, multi-winged organism of the flock needs a body to inhabit, a place to rest, and a sanctuary to raise its young. You don't build a house or seek shelter in a cave on the ground. Your home is the eyrie, and it is not found, but made. The process begins with the most critical decision your flock will ever make, choosing the right cliff. This is the Paleolithic version of real estate, and the stakes are infinitely higher. the ideal location must satisfy a dozen conflicting requirements. The rock face must be high enough to be inaccessible to climbing predators, but not so high that the air is too thin or the weather too extreme. It must be sheltered from the prevailing wind, which can sap body heat and make takeoffs treacherous. Most importantly, it needs to be near a source of reliable thermal updrafts. Those invisible elevators of warm air are your highways, and living far from one is like living miles from the nearest road. The geology of the Great Rift Valley, with its layers of relatively soft volcanic tuff and sedimentary rock, provides the perfect canvas for your work. Once a suitable cliff is chosen, the real labor begins. You don't build with wood or stone, you excavate. Your primary tool is the Alderone chopper, the same beautifully simple and brutally effective technology used by your ground-dwelling cousins. It's a heavy, rounded stone, flaked to create a single sharp edge. Clinging to the cliff face, you and your flockmates begin the slow, arduous process of chipping away at the rock. The air fills with a rhythmic tapping and a constant cloud of fine, gritty dust that gets into your eyes, your lungs, and everything you eat. This is not the work of a day or a week. It is a generational project of immense toil. Archaeologists in this alternate timeline still debate whether the great Ares of the Paleolithic were carved by a single determined generation or were expanded upon over centuries in a process of collective labor akin to stigmergy, where one individual's work creates the stimulus for the next to continue. A small, shallow nook carved by a single family becomes the starting point for their children, who instinctively know how to deepen it, to widen it, to connect it to a neighbor's dwelling. Over hundreds of years without any blueprint or master plan, a sprawling organic city of ledges and shallow caves emerges, etched into the face of the mountain. Life within the area is a life of enforced intimacy and constant background vertigo. Your living space is a cramped, scooped-out hollow in the rock, perhaps just big enough for your small family to huddle together for warmth. The wind is a constant presence, a low moan that never truly ceases. And always, there is the drop. A few feet from where you sleep is a sheer 1,000-foot fall to the valley floor. You develop a unique psychology, a state of hyper-awareness of your body in space. Every movement is deliberate, economical, and sure-footed. Raising children in this environment leads to one of your first and most crucial technological innovations, the tether. A simple cord, woven from tough vines or animal sinew, is tied around an infant's waist and secured to the rock. It is the only thing that allows a child to learn to move without a single mistake proving fatal. The view from your home is, to put it mildly, spectacular. But it's a beauty with teeth, a constant reminder of the price of a single moment of carelessness. And then there is the practical, unglamorous reality of waste. Everything you don't eat, and all bodily waste, has only one place to go: over the edge. This simple fact dictates the entire social structure of the area. Nobody wants to live directly beneath someone else. This immediately creates a clear and visible hierarchy. The highest, most desirable ledges, those with the cleanest air and a guarantee that nothing unpleasant will fall on you from above, are occupied by the dominant families, the strongest hunters, and the most experienced navigators. The lower you live on the cliff face, the lower your social status. Your position in society is, quite literally, your altitude. As the morning sun warms the vast stone face of your mountain home, the air begins to move. You can feel it through the soles of your feet, a subtle vibration in the rock. the birth of the day's thermals. This is your signal. The gnawing hunger in your belly, a constant companion since the moment you awoke, demands to be fed. From the highest ledges, the hunting parties launch themselves into the crisp morning air, a cascade of leathery wings catching the rising currents. Your tools, once limited to the heavy choppers used to carve your home, have undergone a revolution. Just as your ground-dwelling counterparts in our timeline experienced an explosion of creativity in the Upper Paleolithic, inventing sophisticated new technologies like the atlatl and the harpoon, your people have engineered a specialized toolkit for a three-dimensional war on hunger. Your primary weapon is a masterpiece of physics and brutal simplicity. You might call it a flechette. It is a short, slender spear, perhaps 3 feet long, carved from fire-hardened wood and tipped with a lethally sharp point of obsidian or flint. Its most important feature is the fletching at the back. Feathers carefully bound with sinew. These feathers don't help it fly. They ensure it falls perfectly straight. You don't throw this weapon. You simply release it from a great height. As scientific principles of terminal velocity dictate, it plummets silently, stabilized by the fletching, turning the potential energy of your altitude into devastating kinetic energy. It is a silent, armor-piercing projectile capable of striking a creature on the ground before they even hear you coming. For airborne prey, you employ a different tool, the bola. 3 or more stones, carefully rounded, are tied to long cords of woven sinew. Whirling it above your head and releasing it at the perfect moment, you can send it spinning through the air. The goal isn't to kill, but to entangle. A well-aimed bola can wrap around the wing of a large bird, breaking its rhythm, destroying its ability to fly, and sending it tumbling from the sky. For larger, more coordinated efforts, hunting parties will use immense nets, woven from the same tough materials, to ensnare entire flocks of smaller birds between 2 converging groups of hunters. Prehistorians in this alternate world are sharply divided on the primary hunting strategy of early Homo alatus. The evidence suggests a mix of caution and breathtaking audacity. By far the most common and safest method is aerial scavenging. You spend hours circling thousands of feet above the plains, a patient speck in the blue, your sharp eyes scanning for the telltale signs of a kill. You watch a pack of dire wolves run down a prehistoric horse, or a lone saber-tooth ambush a bison. You wait, conserving energy, until the predators have eaten their fill and moved on. Only then do you descend, a silent, winged cleanup crew, to feast on the high-energy fat and meat left on the carcass. It's a low-risk, reliable way to feed your family. But sometimes, scavenging isn't enough. For a bigger prize, you must engage in the cooperative flock hunt. Your target is a formidable opponent, perhaps a Teratornis, a monstrous condor-like bird with a wingspan that rivals your own. No single hunter could face such a creature. But a flock of 10 or 20, working in concert, is another matter. You become a swarm of winged harassers, goading the giant bird, forcing it towards the cliff faces where its broad wings are a liability and its maneuverability is limited. In the confusion, designated hunters move in, casting their bolas, trying to foul a wing and bring the beast down. Finally, there is the plunge. It is the most dangerous, the most prestigious, and the most terrifying way to hunt. It is a high-stakes career choice with no retirement plan, usually reserved for the young, the bold, and the desperate. From an altitude of 1,000 feet or more, you spot your prey on the ground, perhaps a juvenile mammoth strayed from its mother. You fold your wings and dive. The wind becomes a solid, screaming wall of force. The world blurs into a smear of green and brown. Your only focus is that single point below. At the last possible second, you release your flechette, feeling the subtle shift in weight, and then pull out of the dive, your muscles and bones screaming in protest against the immense G-forces. If you succeed, you are a hero, bringing back a wealth of meat to the eyrie. If you misjudge, or if your bones can't take the strain, your hunt ends in a silent, final impact. You return home, navigating by the last rays of the sun glinting off the strange, massive cairn of rock your ancestors piled on the highest mountain peaks, monuments whose purpose, whether as graves or guides, is still a mystery. Back in the relative safety of the eyrie, as the last light fades and the wind cools, the flock comes together. The spoils of the hunt are shared, reinforcing the bonds that keep you all alive. Your entire world is contained within this small vertical village, and the handful of faces illuminated by the small, smoky fire. Your social structure is, by necessity, intimate and intense. The flock is typically composed of 20 to 50 individuals, a number that mirrors the size of hunter-gatherer bands in our own Paleolithic. This seems to be a magic number for highly social mammals, large enough to be resilient, but small enough for everyone to know everyone else, their strengths, their weaknesses, their histories. Kinship is the invisible thread that holds it all together. Leadership in the flock is not a matter of birthright or formal titles. It is fluid, practical, and earned anew each day. There is no single chief. Instead, there is a council of experts. The most successful hunter, the one who led the plunge and brought back the most meat, commands the respect of the other hunters and leads the next expedition. The oldest matriarch, whose mind holds the collective memory of the flock, the location of hidden water seeps, the patterns of animal migrations, the subtle signs of a coming storm, is the one whose guidance is sought for long journeys. Just as paleoanthropologists in our world debate the complex social structures of Neanderthals, scholars in this one argue passionately about the hierarchy of the Paleolithic flock. Drawing evidence from primatology, most agree it wasn't a simple alpha-male dominant structure. It was likely a far more complex and intelligent system, a meritocracy where influence was granted based on proven skill and wisdom, not just brute strength. This celebration of skill is etched onto the very rock you call home. Your art is not hidden deep within subterranean caves. It is a public gallery, painted and carved on exposed cliff faces for all to see. Using pigments made from ochre, charcoal, and chalk, you create a vibrant record of your lives. You don't paint bison and horses. You paint the world you see, the immense, terrifying shape of a terra tornis, the swirling, abstract patterns of wind currents, and the familiar star patterns you use to navigate on moonless nights. And when you depict your own people, they are not simple stick figures. They are dynamic shapes defined by one dominant feature, the glorious sweeping arc of their wings. Your culture has its own version of the small, portable art found in our own Stone Age. But while your ground-dwelling cousins carved plump, heavy Venus figurines that celebrated earthly fertility, you carve something very different. From soapstone or bone, you create small, smooth effigies that are elongated and aerodynamic. They are not goddesses of birth, but abstract representations of flight itself. The perfect dive, the effortless soar. These wind mothers are carried as personal totems, a prayer for a safe flight and a successful hunt. Your personal adornments are also born of the sky. You wear necklaces strung with the curved, pearlescent shards of giant eggshells, and you weave the iridescent feathers of your prey into your hair, a flash of color that signifies your prowess as a hunter. Nowhere is your unique culture more evident than in your approach to death. Your deepest held taboo is the ground, the underworld, the place of crawling things. To be buried in the earth would be to trap the spirit, to deny it the freedom of the sky. So when a member of the flock dies, you perform the ritual of the sky burial. The body is carefully cleaned and wrapped in a hide. At dawn, when the first thermals begin to rise, the strongest flyers, often the deceased's closest kin, take the body. They carry their burden upwards, climbing higher and higher, a slow, solemn procession into the vast emptiness of the sky. At the apex of their flight, straining in the thin, cold air, they release their loved one, giving the body back to the wind. It is an act of profound grief and ultimate respect, a final flight into the blue eternity that was their life, their world, and their heaven. For thousands of generations, your way of life has been dictated by the rhythm of the hunt and the whims of the wind. But now, the world itself is changing. The great ice sheets that have locked up the north for millennia are in retreat. The air is growing warmer, the rains more frequent. At first, this seems like a blessing, a great thawing of the world. But the change is not smooth. The climate lurches, shifting between warm, wet periods and sudden, bone-chilling cold snaps. One such event, a final 1,000-year-long winter known in our timeline as the Younger Dryas, throws your world into chaos. The predictable migratory patterns of the great birds you hunt dissolve. The skies, once a reliable larder, become empty and unpredictable for seasons at a time. The old ways are failing, and the gnawing ache of hunger becomes the backdrop to every waking moment. Your people are pushed to the brink, forced to consider every possible source of food. It is in this time of desperation that your attention turns to the high, flat-topped mountains that dot the landscape, the mesas and plateaus. These places, once just landmarks on a long flight, now become objects of intense interest. They are natural fortresses, their sheer cliffs making them inaccessible to any ground-based creature. And on their flat, sun-drenched tops, you notice that certain hardy grasses with heavy seed heads and starchy, tuberous plants grow in abundance. This is your fertile crescent, 1,000 feet in the air. Just as historians in our world debate whether agriculture was a conscious choice for a better life or a trap of last resort born of necessity, your own descendants argue the same. Was it a moment of brilliant invention or an act of desperation? The archaeological record is ambiguous. It shows that during this period of climate chaos, your people were suddenly building those enigmatic stone cairns on the highest peaks, massive communal projects that suggest a religious or social response to the crisis. Much like the great temple of Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers in our world before they settled down to farm. It seems the upheaval in your beliefs and society began even before you sowed the first seed. The shift to farming is not an event. It's a slow, painstaking process. It begins with a woman, perhaps your great-grandmother, noticing that where she discarded the seeds of a particularly nourishing grass, a thick patch of it grew the next season. Her daughter takes the next step, deliberately saving the largest seeds and clearing a small patch of ground for them. Now it is your generation that engages in the back-breaking labor of transforming the plateau. You clear rocks, you pull competing weeds, and you begin to construct the first stone-walled terraces to prevent the thin soil from washing away. You are engaging in the slow, methodical science of artificial selection. You learn to identify and propagate the plants with the most desirable traits. You save the seeds from the mountain barley, whose heads don't shatter and spill when the wind blows. You replant the tubers from the plants that are the largest and least bitter. Generation by generation, you are actively reshaping the genetics of these plants, turning wild grasses into domestic grains. It is a demanding new way of life, an endless cycle of planting and weeding and harvesting, but for the first time in memory, there is a promise of a full belly. You do the same with animals. You cannot herd cattle or swine up the side of a sheer cliff. You domesticate the creatures of the high places. You learn to build stone corrals to trap entire herds of wild mountain goats. Over time, you breed them, selecting not for the most aggressive, but for the most docile. You learn to milk them, a rich source of fat and protein. You breed them for their thick wool, which you learn to spin into warm yarn. These creatures become a living, breathing food supply that doesn't fly away. Alongside them, you might domesticate a species of large, flightless bird, corralling them for their meat and their enormous, nutrient-rich eggs. You are no longer simply a hunter, a passenger on the currents of the world. You are becoming a farmer, a shaper of the land itself. You have traded the wild freedom of the chase for the profound security of the harvest. The harvest changes everything. For the first time in your species' history, you have a surplus of food, a guarantee that you will eat tomorrow and the week after, and perhaps even through the winter. This security severs the bonds of nomadism. You no longer need to follow the unpredictable herds or wander in search of nesting birds. Your farm on the high plateau is your larder, and your eyrie on the cliff face is no longer a seasonal camp, but a permanent, year-round home. The simple, scooped-out ledges of the Paleolithic are not enough for this new, sedentary life. You begin to build, to expand, to connect. Your home grows into your neighbor's home, which connects to the one below it with a new, sturdy rope ladder. Your eyrie is becoming a village. Imagine the famous Neolithic site of Çatalhöyük in our timeline, a sprawling proto-city in Turkey where houses were built crammed together with no streets and access was through the roof. Your eyrie village becomes a vertical version of this, a dense honeycomb of dwellings plastered against the rock, a maze of ladders, ledges, and woven nets serving as public walkways. Just as archaeologists in our world debate the social reasons for Çatalhöyük's unique design, scholars in yours argue passionately about the intricate rules of etiquette and property that governed life in a village where your neighbor's roof was your front porch. This new settled life creates new problems, which in turn demand new technologies. Chief among them is the problem of storage. A mountain of grain is useless if it gets wet or eaten by pests. The solution comes from the earth itself. Perhaps someone notices a lump of clay, discarded near a fire, has been baked hard and waterproof. Through trial and error, you invent pottery. You learn the science of it. That heating clay to a temperature of over 600 degrees Celsius causes a chemical reaction, driving out water molecules and fusing the silicate particles into a new, hard, durable material called ceramic. This invention is a revolution. For the first time, you have containers to keep grain dry and safe, to store water, and to cook stews and mashes, unlocking more nutrition from your food. With a steady supply of wool from your domesticated mountain goats, you also master the arts of spinning and weaving. Using a simple drop spindle, you twist the coarse fibers into strong yarn. On a primitive loom, you weave that yarn into textiles, warm blankets against the high-altitude chill, durable clothing, and most importantly, far stronger and more reliable ropes than you could ever make from vines. These ropes become the arteries of your vertical village. At the same time, you become masons, learning to build dry stone walls to reinforce your dwellings and to expand the precious terraces on your farm. This technological leap is driven by a profound social shift. A reliable food source means more children survive to adulthood. Your population is booming. The small flock of 50 has become a bustling village of several hundred. And with a food surplus, not everyone has to spend their days on the farm. Specialists emerge. You see the first person who is just a potter, spending all her time by the kiln. You see weavers, rope makers, and builders. And critically, you see the first full-time warriors, strong flyers whose only job is to perch on the high watchtowers, guarding the village and its precious surplus from the growing threat of other, hungrier villages. This specialization leads to the final great innovation of this new era: trade. Your mountain has the finest clay in the region, but lacks good flint for tool-making. A village a day's flight to the west, however, sits on a rich deposit of obsidian, but has poor soil. A new kind of journey begins. A daring flyer loads a woven cargo net with dozens of newly fired pots and makes the long flight to the obsidian mountain to barter. This is the end of self-sufficiency. In the old days, you managed risk through social storage, a network of obligations with other flocks. Now you manage it through the physical storage of goods and the beginning of a complex aerial trade network. You are no longer just a village, you are becoming a part of a wider world. This new settled world of farms and villages requires a new kind of mind, a new set of stories to make sense of it all. The tools and technologies you've developed are only the external signs of a much deeper, internal transformation. Your very soul is being replanted in the soil of the high plateaus. Your relationship with the gods is changing. The old spirits of the hunt and the unpredictable winds are still there, but they are becoming secondary to a new, more orderly pantheon of agricultural deities. These new gods are like you. They are settled, they have routines, and they are demanding. You now pray to the Sun Father, whose steady warmth coaxes your barley from the soil. You make offerings to the Rain Mother, whose tears can mean the difference between a feast and a famine. Your farm on the plateau is no longer just a place of work. It becomes sacred ground, a temple in the open air where you perform the rituals of planting and harvesting that ensure the gods' favor. Your creation myths are rewritten. The old tales of ancestors who simply emerged from the sky feel too simple now. A grander, more deliberate story takes root. Theologians and anthropologists in your world still debate the exact nature of the Great Sky Egg myth, but in most tellings the story is the same. In the beginning, the world was only rock and wind. The great sky god laid a single, colossal egg on the peak of the highest mountain. Warmed by the Sun Father for 1,000 years, the egg finally cracked, and from it emerged the first winged humans, your ancestors. This story solidifies your identity. You are not of the dirt, you are children of the sky, and your sacred duty is to live between the rock of your birth and the heavens of your father. This new reliance on the agricultural calendar makes a precise understanding of the heavens a matter of survival. Living high above the clouds, with a clear and undiluted view of the cosmos, you become the world's first true astronomers. A new class of specialists emerges, the priest astronomers, who spend their nights charting the slow, majestic dance of the stars. They build rudimentary observatories on the highest points of the plateau, using carved stone markers to track the sun-nods and sunset, noting the exact day of the solstice and the equinox. From these observations, they create a sophisticated calendar, a celestial guide that tells you when to plant your seeds and when you must harvest before the first snows. On the surface of your most sacred plateau, you carve a massive stone disk into the rock itself, a recreation of the heavens that maps the constellations and the phases of the moon, a precursor to the famous Nebra sky disk of our world, a testament to your deep celestial knowledge. But this new civilized life casts a long, dark shadow. For all its stability, it comes at a steep biological price. While your hunter-gatherer ancestors enjoyed a varied diet of meat, eggs, and insects, you now subsist primarily on a few starchy crops and the milk of your goats. You have more food, but your nutrition is poorer. Fossil evidence shows the grim results. Your average height decreases. Your bones and teeth show the telltale signs of nutritional deficiencies like anemia, scurvy, and rickets. You work harder too. The back-breaking labor of terrace farming is far more demanding than the intermittent efforts of the hunt. Even more devastating is the arrival of epidemic disease. Living in a dense, permanent village, in close quarters with your neighbors and your newly domesticated animals, creates the perfect breeding ground for pathogens. This is the birthplace of zoonosis, the process by which a disease learns to jump from an animal host to a human one. A mild sickness that has lived in your goat herds for centuries suddenly mutates, and for the first time, you experience the horror of a plague. A fever sweeps through the crowded area, killing dozens, particularly the very young and the very old. This is the great and terrible paradox of the Neolithic revolution. Individually, your health has declined. Your life is likely shorter and harder than that of your nomadic ancestors. But collectively, as a species, you are a runaway success. The stable food supply allows your population to boom, to spread from your home mountain to the next, a slow, inexorable wave of winged farmers. You have made a grim but effective bargain, trading the quality of individual lives for the unstoppable quantity of your people. Your world of stone and pottery, of goat herds and barley fields, has reached its limits. The airy villages are growing, the plateaus are becoming crowded, and the competition for resources between neighboring communities is growing sharper. Your stone tools, for all their utility, are brittle. An axe can shatter on a hard piece of wood. A flint spear point can break at a critical moment. You have become masters of your environment, but your progress is capped by the limitations of your materials. The next great leap forward will not come from a new way of planting, but from a new kind of stone. A stone that can be melted and reshaped. The discovery is made possible, once again, by your unique perspective. On a long scouting flight, miles from home, you soar over an unfamiliar mountain range. Your eyes, trained to spot the subtle movements of prey from 1,000 feet up, are drawn to a flash of brilliant green on a distant, inaccessible cliff face. It's a vein of malachite, an ore of copper exposed by a rock slide. To a ground dweller, it would be an invisible speck. To you, it's a beacon. You and your fellow flyers are the world's first and greatest prospectors, able to survey vast territories and spot the telltale discolorations of mineral wealth that no one else can see. Getting the ore is a challenge, but smelting it is a near impossibility. Your early attempts are frustrating. A normal fire, even one fed with the driest wood, doesn't burn hot enough to melt the stone, especially in the thin air of your high-altitude homes. The problem vexes your brightest minds for a generation until a new invention changes everything. The bellows. By building a forge into a nook in the cliff and using large leather bags to pump a continuous stream of air into the burning charcoal, you can raise the temperature to a roaring white-hot intensity. Some early experimental forges get so hot that they accidentally melt the surrounding rock into a glassy slag, a phenomenon that mystifies future archaeologists, much like the vitrified forts of ancient Scotland in our own world. Metallurgists of your world still debate who the first true smiths were, but someone, somewhere, trying to purify their copper, adds a small amount of a different metallic sand, cassiterite, the ore of tin. The result is miraculous. The science of alloying is discovered. Adding about 10% tin to the molten copper lowers its melting point, and once cooled, creates a new material that is far harder, stronger, and less brittle than either of its parent metals. This new material is bronze. The historical implication is immense. Copper and tin deposits are almost never found in the same place. The moment bronze becomes the most sought-after material, the tentative trade routes of the Neolithic explode into continent-spanning highways of commerce, an absolute necessity for any ambitious community. The Bronze Revolution transforms every aspect of your life. A bronze sickle can harvest a field in half the time. A bronze saw can cut wood with unprecedented precision. But the most dramatic changes are in the art of war. The old, disposable flint points of your flechettes are replaced with heavy cast bronze heads, aerodynamically shaped to fall true and pierce the thickest hide. A terrifying new weapon emerges from the forges. Bronze talons. These are sharpened bronze claws designed to be strapped to your feet, turning a high-speed flyby into a lethal slashing attack. Aerial combat, once a distant affair of projectiles, now has a visceral, close-quarters dimension. And for the powerful and the wealthy, smiths begin to craft the first armor. It can't be a full suit. That would be far too heavy to fly. But a carefully shaped bronze breastplate can deflect a spear thrust, and a lightweight helmet can turn a fatal blow into a glancing one. An arms race has begun, and the glint of bronze in the high-altitude sun becomes the defining color of a new, more powerful, and far more dangerous age. The power of bronze is the power to reshape the world. With tools that do not shatter and an influx of wealth from the burgeoning trade in metals, you begin to alter your home on a scale previously unimaginable. Your airy village, a crowded honeycomb of interconnected dwellings, is bursting at the seams. The population boom of the Neolithic Age is now supercharged by the opportunities of the Bronze Age. The carving doesn't stop. It continues upwards towards the summit, downwards towards the safer lower slopes, and sideways for miles. Your home is no longer a village. It is a city. Imagine the ancient city of Petra in our world, with its magnificent temples carved from the red rock of a hidden canyon. Now imagine that city magnified 1,000 times, a sprawling, multi-tiered metropolis carved not into a secret valley, but onto the exposed, sun-blasted face of an entire mountain, home to tens of thousands of souls. A city of this scale and verticality cannot function without a new kind of infrastructure. The simple rope ladders of the past give way to vast, swaying rope bridges, engineering marvels that span terrifying chasms to connect one district of the city to another. Across the wider plazas, your people weave colossal nets from thick, bronze fiber-reinforced rope. Urban historians of this world still debate the primary function of these great nets. Were they simply safety measures designed to catch an unfortunate child, or a dropped piece of valuable pottery? Or were they something more? The world's first public squares, aerial plazas where citizens could gather and socialize in large numbers without having to cling precariously to a narrow ledge. To move heavy goods, you develop an understanding of mechanical advantage. Using your durable ropes and newly cast bronze wheels, you engineer intricate pulley systems and cranes. A team of just 10 flyers, pulling in unison, can now hoist a multi-ton block of stone from the mountain's base to the highest construction sites, a feat that would have been impossible just a few generations ago. Maintaining these bridges, nets, and lifts requires organization, which gives rise to the first municipal governments, councils tasked with managing the complex machinery of urban life. The morning commute from the residential ledges to the market districts is getting crowded, and someone has to direct the traffic. The demand for tin and copper has transformed trade from a regional luxury into the engine of your civilization. You are now living in the age of the great trade routes. These are not roads of stone or paths on the sea. They are wind roads, invisible highways in the sky. They follow the most reliable seasonal wind patterns and the thermal updrafts generated by long mountain chains, creating corridors for long-distance travel. A new class of individual is born. The merchant navigator, a daring adventurer who risks the treacherous journey of 1,000 miles to bring back the precious metals your city craves. Along these wind roads, you find a unique form of navigation. On certain mountain peaks, your ancestors have carved and polished enormous flat faces of rock to a mirror-like sheen. These sun flashes, angled perfectly, catch the rising or setting sun, creating a brilliant beacon of light that can be seen for 100 miles, guiding the merchants to their next waypoint. Much like the enigmatic Nazca lines of our world are only truly visible from the sky. The markets of your sky city are a dizzying spectacle of this new globalized world. You see the raw power of your civilization in the heavy, dull ingots of copper and the much rarer, shinier bars of tin. You see traders from distant salt flats, their wares packed in woven baskets. And you see the arrival of true luxury goods for the first time. Fine textiles dyed in brilliant blues and purples from pigments found a continent away, caches of razor-sharp obsidian, and the ultimate status symbol, the dazzling, iridescent tail feathers of tropical birds, an exotic splash of color that proves its owner has the wealth to touch the furthest corners of the known world. The wealth generated by bronze and the trade it fuels flows into your city like a great river, but it does not nourish everyone equally. The old, relatively egalitarian structure of the flock, where status was earned through skill, dissolves under the pressure of this new economy. A rigid and powerful elite emerges. This new upper class is a mix of merchants whose daring trade ventures have made them fabulously wealthy, and the owners of the mountain mines who control the very source of that wealth. This behavior, this guarding of valuable resources by a dominant few, is a pattern seen throughout the natural world, a fundamental social dynamic that has now taken root in your civilization. These elite families establish themselves on the highest tiers of the mountain city, building sprawling homes with wide balconies that catch the best updrafts. They adorn themselves with polished bronze jewelry, and in an effort to visually separate themselves from the masses, they enact the first sumptuary laws. These unwritten but strictly enforced rules dictate that only members of the ruling families are permitted to wear the brilliant green and blue feathers of the southern jungle birds, turning a simple adornment into an unmistakable sign of power. Into this stratified society, a single dominant figure rises. Historians in your world still debate whether the first kings were military leaders who seized power or wealthy merchants who bought it. In your city, it is a warlord, a brilliant and ruthless commander who controls the largest and best-equipped private army. He uses his bronze-clad warriors to systematically take control of the city's key assets, the mines, the forges, and the trade routes. He then makes a pact with the powerful priest-astronomer class. In exchange for their support and a share of the wealth, they declare him to be a living descendant of the great sky egg, his right to rule a matter of divine will. It's a masterful stroke of political marketing. He is no longer just a warlord. He is the king. To consolidate his power and bring order to his chaotic, sprawling city, the king commissions the first written legal code. Modeled on codes like Hammurabi's in our world, the laws are carved in sharp, clear script onto a towering pillar of black stone erected in the city's central plaza. The laws are a direct reflection of your unique world. There are statutes defining property rights. Who can claim a newly carved-out ledge? There are commercial laws. What is the penalty for mid-air piracy against a merchant's cargo net? And like Hammurabi's code, the laws are brutally stratified. The punishment for injuring a wealthy landowner is the amputation of a wing. The punishment for the same injury to a common farmer is a mere fine. This new organized state also gives rise to the darkest of social innovations, institutionalized slavery. The king's constant wars of expansion against rival cities yield a new and valuable resource: prisoners of war. These captives are stripped of their names and identities, becoming property of the state. They are forced to perform the most dangerous and grueling labor, toiling in the suffocating darkness of the copper mines or hauling materials for the king's new palace. A second, even more wretched class of slaves emerges: the ground walkers. On daring raids, your warriors descend to the lowlands to capture members of the primitive, flightless human tribes that live there. Seen as little more than intelligent animals, these ground walkers are considered subhuman, a permanent underclass with no rights and no hope of escape, destined to live and die as beasts of burden in the shadow of your sky-piercing city. The fluid, merit-based society of your ancestors is now a distant memory. Your world is a rigid pyramid of king, priest, noble, commoner, and slave. Your place in it determined not by your skill, but by your birth. The king's divine right may be a story told by priests, but his power is maintained by the sharp, bronze point of a spear. The chaotic skirmishes of the Neolithic age have evolved into the organized science of warfare. Kings and their new aristocratic generals no longer rely on conscripted farmers. They field the first professional standing armies. These are career soldiers who spend their entire lives training for aerial combat. Their days are filled with endless drills, practicing the complex formations that are the key to victory in the sky. In battle, your armies move with a terrifying, unified purpose. For a frontal assault, they adopt the V formation, a piercing wedge of armored warriors designed to punch through a disorganized enemy line. To protect the king or another high-value asset, they form a massive defensive circle, a constantly swirling sphere of shields and spears. It's an aerial version of the Roman testudo formation, a three-dimensional tortoise shell from which archers and slingers can fire, protected by the interlocking wings and shields of their comrades. War has become a deadly and sophisticated chess game played in 3 dimensions. In response, the architecture of your sky cities transforms. The primary design principle is no longer just access to the sun or shelter from the wind. It is defensibility. New districts are built with interlocking fields of fire in mind, a concept from military science where defenses are layered to channel attackers into designated kill zones. Ledges for archers are carved in staggered patterns so that any approaching enemy is caught in a lethal crossfire. Massive sculpted rock overhangs are extended from the cliff face, making it impossible for an enemy to dive bomb the city from directly above. The great nets that once served as public plazas are now reinforced with bronze wire, designed to stop dropped projectiles. Your city has become a vertical fortress. This makes direct assault a bloody, often suicidal affair. A more patient and far more brutal strategy is the siege. An attacking army establishes a blockade, a total perimeter around the target mountain. Squadrons of warriors patrol the skies in shifts, day and night, ensuring nothing gets in or out. They intercept messengers, drive off any flyers attempting to bring in food, and turn the mountain into an isolated, starving prison. A siege is a grim contest of wills that can last for years, a war of attrition won by whichever side has the larger stockpile of grain. The armies themselves are becoming more complex, with specialized units fulfilling distinct roles on the battlefield. You have the heavies, the strongest flyers who can manage the weight of a bronze breastplate, helmet, and greaves. They are the aerial equivalent of heavy infantry, the shock troops used to break enemy formations in close quarters combat. Then there are the skirmishers, lighter and more agile flyers who wear no armor. They harass the enemy from a distance with javelins and slings, disrupting their formations before the heavies engage. Finally, there is the terrifying new specialist, the bombardier. These units fly high above the main battle, their job being simply to drop things. They drop massive rocks to shatter defensive ledges, or clay pots filled with a thick, flammable pitch, an early incendiary weapon reminiscent of the Byzantine Greek fire, capable of sticking to a wing and creating panic in the enemy ranks. Historians of this timeline still hotly debate a tantalizing and romantic fringe theory. Did the greatest kings of the Bronze Age field an elite unit of warriors who rode into battle on the backs of giant domesticated eagles? The evidence is thin, mostly confined to a few epic poems and heroic carvings. But the image of a bronze-clad hero diving into battle on a monstrous feathered mount is a powerful one. Whether they were a real historical unit or just a myth, these sky dragoons represent the ultimate dream of aerial power in a world now defined by organized industrial-scale war. The relentless logic of the arms race and the organized violence of your new armies leads to an inevitable conclusion: empire. The patchwork of competing city-states is a world of constant, draining warfare. Sooner or later, one city-state, blessed with a series of brilliant generals or a richer supply of bronze, gains a decisive advantage. They don't just defeat their rivals, they conquer and absorb them. This process of violent consolidation is repeated over and over, until a single mighty power controls not just one mountain, but an entire mountain range. You are now living in the age of the first great sky empires. Think of the Akkadian Empire of Sargon the Great in our timeline, the first true empire that brutally unified the city-states of Mesopotamia. Your world now has its own Sargons, ambitious kings who are no longer content to rule a single city. They give themselves new, grander titles: Lord of the highest peaks, Conqueror of the four winds, He who nests in the sun. Their empires are not defined by the course of a river like the Nile or the Tigris, but by the jagged spine of a continent-spanning mountain range, a three-dimensional territory of breathtaking scale and scope. Ruling such a vast and vertical empire presents a unique set of administrative challenges. How do you hold it all together? The key is speed. While a ground-based empire would rely on building roads for its messengers, your empire already has its highways, the sky itself. You establish a corps of elite Imperial messengers, the swiftest flyers in the realm, who can carry the Emperor's decrees from the capital to the most distant provincial city in a matter of days. Their ability to travel as the crow flies, ignoring terrain, gives the Empire a cohesive speed that a terrestrial power could only dream of. The conquered cities are not destroyed, they are integrated into the Imperial system. They become vassal states, allowed to keep their local leaders, but forced to pay a heavy annual tribute to the Imperial capital. Each year, you witness the Great Tribute Flights, a procession of cargo haulers from across the Empire, their nets heavy with ingots of copper, sacks of grain, and jars of fine oil, all destined for the Emperor's storehouses. To further unify the realm, the Emperor imposes a common language for government and trade, and a standardized system of weights and measures. Local cultures are not erased, but they are layered over with the dominant culture of the capital, its gods, its art style, and its social structure. Just as the pharaohs of Egypt built the pyramids to declare their power and ensure their immortality, your new emperors engage in monumental architecture on a scale that beggars belief. They do not build upwards from the ground, they reshape the ground itself. The grandest and most visible mountains in the empire are chosen to become imperial monuments. Using the labor of tens of thousands of slaves, your engineers and artisans spend decades carving entire mountain faces into colossal statues of the ruling emperor and the patron gods of the empire. This is a feat of engineering that dwarfs our timeline's Mount Rushmore. The process is a marvel of applied mathematics and physics, as engineers must calculate the precise angles for carving and the immense stresses involved. Scaffolding is impossible. Instead, the artisans are lowered from the summit on a complex web of ropes and platforms, slowly and meticulously chipping away at the rock face with their bronze tools. The finished statues are hundreds of feet high, their stern faces visible for 100 miles in every direction, a permanent and terrifying reminder to all who see them of the absolute power of the Emperor. They are a declaration carved in stone that even the mountains themselves must bow to the might of the Empire. An empire is more than just an army and a territory. It is a complex machine that requires a new class of people to operate it. Alongside the warriors and farmers, you now see the rise of administrators, engineers, and priests. And within the security and immense wealth of the imperial capital, for the first time in your history, a handful of people have the greatest luxury of all, the time to simply think. This stability allows for the flowering of writing, philosophy, and science. The practical need to manage the empire's vast tribute system is the catalyst for the invention of writing. Just as cuneiform script developed in Mesopotamia to keep track of grain and livestock, your first written language is a system of simple pictographs pressed into wet clay tablets with a stylus. A circle with a dot might mean 1 sack of barley. A wavy line, a jar of oil. It is the language of imperial accountants. But over generations, these simple pictures evolve into a more abstract and flexible script of wedge-shaped marks. Now you can record not just tax receipts, but laws, histories, and the great epic poems of your people. Stories of heroic conqueror kings and their legendary flights. A new, powerful class of scribes emerges, their ability to read and write making them indispensable to the king and feared by the illiterate masses. In the heart of the capital, the emperor founds the Great Library, a vast repository of knowledge modeled on the legendary one in our Alexandria. Tens of thousands of clay tablets are meticulously catalogued. But for your most important religious and historical texts, clay is considered too crude. Instead, master weavers create enormous, intricate tapestries where the patterns, knots, and colors of the threads themselves form a complex language, a far more sophisticated system than the Incan quipu, readable only by the highest priests and the king himself. With access to this accumulated knowledge, the first true philosophers are born. Their questions are the timeless questions of existence, but they are framed by the unique reality of flight. They don't debate the good life on Earth, but the good life in the sky. Their concept of freedom is inseparable from the physical act of flight. Is an individual who is caged physically less free than one who is grounded by their own fear of heights? Their ethics revolve around the responsibilities of the air. Does the stronger, faster flyer have a duty to help the slower and weaker, or does natural selection demand that they be left behind? A classic and troubling thought experiment emerges from this era, one that philosophers in your world still debate as the ground dweller's dilemma. If you, flying high above the plains, were to see a lone, flightless human, a ground walker, trapped and suffering, would you have a moral obligation to attempt a dangerous landing to help? Or does your responsibility remain only to your own kind, to the world of the sky? The question cuts to the very heart of how you define your own humanity. This new intellectual curiosity also fuels a scientific revolution. The practical challenges of the empire drive discovery. The engineers carving the emperor's likeness into a mountain must develop sophisticated geometry and trigonometry to get the proportions correct. This practical need gives birth to theoretical mathematics. Your scholars, fascinated by their own defining trait, become masters of biology and aerodynamics, dissecting birds and bats to create detailed anatomical charts of bone structure and musculature. But the queen of the Imperial sciences is astronomy. From your high-altitude cities, free from the atmospheric haze of the lowlands, your view of the night sky is breathtakingly clear. Priest astronomers create star charts of unparalleled accuracy, and they learn to predict solar and lunar eclipses with enough precision to awe the masses and reinforce their own power. The clarity of their observations allows them to notice something that would remain hidden from ground dwellers for thousands of years: the subtle parallax effect, the apparent shift of nearby stars against the distant background as your world moves through space. This leads a few brilliant and heretical thinkers to a terrifying conclusion. Your world is not the stationary center of the universe. It is, in fact, itself flying in a great, silent orbit around the sun. The great sky empire, which seemed as permanent and immovable as the mountains themselves, begins to rot from within. Its sheer size has become a fatal weakness. The bureaucracy, once a marvel of efficiency, is now bloated and corrupt. Provincial governors, ruling from mountain capitals a week's flight from the emperor, begin to act not as subjects, but as independent kings, hoarding tribute for themselves. The grand great man theory of history, The idea that a single heroic leader can shape destiny fails completely here. No single emperor, no matter how brilliant, can possibly plug the 1,000 leaks in this sinking ship. The final blow comes not from an army, but from the sky itself. A devastating centuries-long climate shift occurs. The predictable monsoon winds that bring the summer rains falter. A great drought settles over the continent. This acts as a terrifying threat multiplier. The high-altitude farms, once the Empire's pride, wither into dust. The Imperial granaries, drained by corruption, empty with shocking speed. Famine grips the mountain cities. The common people, starving and desperate, rise up in violent riots. The provincial lords, seeing the emperor is powerless to help, declare their independence, raising their own armies to seize what little food remains. Into this chaos, a new force appears on the frontiers. They are the Sky Barbarians. Just as historians in our world debate the true identity of the mysterious Sea Peoples who brought down the Hittites and Mycenaeans during the Bronze Age collapse, your scholars argue endlessly about the origins of these newcomers. Are they nomadic flocks from the vast, uncharted eastern steppes, driven from their lands by the same drought? Or are they descendants of imperial citizens who rejected civilization generations ago? Whatever their origin, they are a terrifying sight. Vast hordes of flyers, unarmored but fighting with a ferocious discipline, their wings painted with savage alien symbols. They do not fight to conquer. They fight to burn, to pillage, and to shatter the old world. The once invincible Imperial army, stretched thin fighting both internal rebellions and external invasions, finally breaks. The emperor is killed, the capital is sacked, and the great empire shatters into 1,000 pieces. The intricate network of trade and communication, the wind roads that held your world together, collapses. The world becomes smaller, more dangerous, and profoundly isolated. In the ensuing anarchy, survival depends on strength and loyalty. A local warlord, or the surviving commander of an imperial garrison, seizes control of a single mountain or a small valley, declaring himself a lord. He fortifies his mountain peak into a defensible castle, a keep, and rules over his small territory. From the ashes of the empire, a new social and political system is born out of desperation. Feudalism. It is a pyramid of personal oaths. The most powerful lord in a given region might claim the title of king, though his authority is a pale shadow of the old emperor's. To secure his realm, he grants control of a mountain keep to a lesser lord, a trusted warrior, in exchange for a solemn vow of military service. This is the knight's fee. That lord, in turn, grants the common families, the farmers and craftsmen, the right to build their homes on the cliff faces of his mountain and to work a plot of land. In exchange, they are no longer free. They become serfs, bound to the land and owing their lord a hefty portion of their harvest and their labor. The grand, unified world of the empire is a forgotten dream. Your reality is now a fractured patchwork of tiny, warring kingdoms. Your life and loyalty sworn not to a distant emperor, but to the lord whose castle looms at the summit of your mountain. In this fractured and dangerous new world, the old imperial legions are a distant memory. Power is no longer held by a centralized state, but by the individual lord in his high-altitude keep, and his power is measured by the strength and loyalty of the warriors he can command. This reality gives birth to a new kind of hero, a new social ideal. the Sky Knight. The warrior class, now the bedrock of the feudal system, is elevated to the status of a landed aristocracy. The technology of war has also changed. The Bronze Age has given way to the slow, difficult mastery of a new metal: iron. Iron ore is far more common than copper and tin, but it is much harder to work, requiring higher temperature forges and a greater degree of skill to produce a metal that isn't brittle and useless. Early iron armor is often cruder and heavier than the masterfully cast bronze of the old empire, but its availability means that armor is no longer the sole province of the ultra-rich. Your new Sky Knights are clad in articulated iron plates, cleverly designed for aerial combat, with a focus on protecting the torso, head, and the leading edge of the wing bones, while leaving the legs and wing membranes largely unencumbered. With this new status comes a new ideology, a strict set of rules and ideals known as the Code of the Air. Much like the chivalric code of medieval Europe, it is a moral framework that governs the life of a knight. The code demands absolute loyalty to one's lord, unflinching courage in the face of the enemy, and a degree of honor in combat. Historians of this age argue endlessly over whether the Code of the Air was a genuine moral framework that restrained the inherent violence of the warrior class, or if it was simply a romantic justification for their brutal dominance over the peasantry. In practice, it was likely both. In the brief periods of peace between the endless feudal wars, these highly skilled warriors need an outlet for their aggression and a stage to display their prowess. This need gives rise to the grand aerial tournament. Lords host these massive events to gain prestige, and knights travel for hundreds of miles to compete for fame and fortune. The contests are a spectacular display of aerial skill. There is the canyon race, a breathtakingly dangerous, high-speed flight through a narrow, winding gorge. There is the lance drop, a test of pure accuracy, where a knight must drop a weighted, blunted spear from a great height to hit a small target on the ground. The main event is the Grand Melee, a mock battle between two massive teams of knights using blunted weapons, a chaotic and thrilling spectacle for the crowds that gather on the castle's balconies. In the swirling chaos of a real battle, or a tournament melee, identifying friend from foe is critical. A shield is a clumsy, aerodynamically inefficient thing for a flyer to carry, so the art of heraldry takes a different form. A knight's coat of arms, his unique combination of colors and symbols representing his lineage, is painted directly onto the broad, leathery membrane of his wings. A charging formation of knights is a dazzling, terrifying sight, a living tapestry of roaring lions, stooping eagles, and stark, geometric patterns, each pair of wings a vibrant banner of identity and intent. For the truly elite, the greatest kings establish chivalric orders, exclusive brotherhoods of the finest warriors, like the prestigious Order of the Golden Talon. To be inducted into such an order is the highest honor a knight can aspire to, a sign that you have reached the absolute pinnacle of this new, warrior-dominated world. Your life is not one of chivalric honor or grand tournaments. You are a serf, a farmer, a craftsman. Your world is the small ledge your family has occupied for generations, the patch of farmland on the high plateau, and the authority of the Lord in the castle far above. Your life is governed by three things: the demands of your Lord, the rhythm of the seasons, and the doctrines of the all-powerful Church of the Sky. It is a static society. The constant, low-level warfare between feudal lords saps any surplus wealth that could be used for innovation. The collapse of the old trade routes has left your community intellectually, as well as physically isolated. The greatest invention in your lifetime might be a slightly more efficient harness for the mountain goats. Sociologists of your world debate whether the rigid social structure of this age was a source of comforting stability or the primary cause of its technological stagnation. In truth, it was both. Life is predictable, if nothing else. You are born a farmer, you will die a farmer, and your children will be farmers after you. Providing a comforting and absolute certainty to this rigid structure is the Church. In the political vacuum left by the fallen empire, a single organized religion has grown to become the undisputed center of life, a direct parallel to the Catholic Church in Europe's Middle Ages. The Church of the Sky is a massive, international institution with a strict hierarchy of priests, bishops, and archbishops. It is immensely wealthy, owning vast tracts of the most fertile plateau farms. Its bishops are the trusted advisors to kings, and its humble priests are the moral and spiritual authority in every area, no matter how small. The Church's primary function is to provide the divine justification for the feudal order. They preach a version of the great chain of being, a cosmic ladder on which every creature has its place. God is at the top, then the king, then the lords and knights, then the common folk. At the very bottom, just above the beasts, are the flightless ground walkers. This isn't a social system, the priests teach. It is a divine, unchangeable reality. The ground below is not just a dangerous place, it is a literal, fiery hell. To be cast down is to suffer eternal damnation. In a world where literacy is confined to a handful of priests and nobles, art and music become the scripture of the common person. Your art is almost exclusively religious, since you cannot build soaring cathedrals with stained glass. Your holiest spaces are carved deep into the mountain itself, vast, echoing chapels cut from the living rock. The walls of these sanctuaries are covered in vibrant frescoes, biblical picture books for the masses. They depict the glorious hatching of the first humans from the great sky egg, the lives of the saints, legendary flyers who performed miracles, and gruesome, terrifying images of sinners losing their wings and spiraling down into the hellish world below. The music of your church is uniquely adapted to your environment. The acoustics of a mountain valley and the constant presence of wind make the human voice difficult to hear over long distances. Based on the physical principles of sound, you have discovered that high-frequency sounds, like whistles, travel further and cut through the background noise more effectively. Thus, your sacred music is not sung, but whistled. A church service is a haunting and beautiful experience, not of organ music and chanted words, but of a choir of trained whistlers performing complex, multi-part harmonies. Their melodies, intricate and soaring, echo from the cliff faces and drift across the valleys. A constant, ethereal reminder of the presence of God in a world defined by faith, duty, and tradition. After centuries of stagnation, your world begins to awaken. The catalyst is not a king or a priest, but a trader. As the constant low-level warfare of the feudal era slowly gives way to the rise of more stable, centralized kingdoms, the old wind roads are cautiously reopened. A merchant, seeking new markets in a distant, half-forgotten mountain range, stumbles upon the ruins of an ancient Imperial library, miraculously preserved in the dry, high-altitude air. Inside, he finds not just clay tablets, but the great woven tapestries of the ancients, their intricate patterns holding the lost knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. This rediscovery of the classical past ignites a fire of intellectual curiosity across the continent, an event much like the Italian Renaissance in our own history. Scholars and monks painstakingly begin to translate these ancient works, rediscovering mathematical principles and philosophical ideas that have been lost for 1,000 years. The rigid, faith-based worldview of the medieval church is challenged by the logic and reason of your ancestors. A new spirit of inquiry and skepticism begins to spread. This rebirth is most visible in the arts. Wealthy merchants and bankers, their fortunes growing from the reopened trade routes, become the new patrons of the arts, and they are less interested in funding pious religious frescoes. They want art that celebrates the beauty and dynamism of the world they live in. Your artists, inspired by the newly rediscovered anatomical charts from the Imperial libraries, begin to study the human form with a new scientific rigor. They dissect bird wings and study their own bodies, seeking to understand the mechanics of flight. Their paintings and sculptures explode with a newfound realism. The stiff, two-dimensional figures of medieval art are replaced by dynamic, anatomically correct depictions of the winged human body in motion. Perspective in art takes on a profound new meaning. For a ground-based culture, perspective is about creating the illusion of depth on a flat plane. For you, it becomes a tool to capture the terrifying and exhilarating reality of vertigo, of immense height and vast open space. Artists become masters of conveying the dizzying scale of your world, their paintings giving the viewer the feeling of soaring through the clouds or looking down from a terrifying precipice. This artistic and intellectual revolution gives birth to a new philosophy, aerial humanism. It is a profound shift in focus, away from the divine afterlife and towards the potential and achievements of the individual in this life. The new ideal is not the pious saint, but the Renaissance flyer, a person who strives for excellence in all things, a master of art and science, a skilled warrior, and a graceful and daring flyer. The perfection of the individual's flight becomes a metaphor for the perfection of the soul. This new philosophy celebrates human potential and agency. It suggests that your place in the world is not simply ordained by God, but can be shaped by your own will, your own courage, and your own intellect. The seeds of the modern world and of a future conflict with the old, dogmatic authority of the Church have been firmly planted. The Renaissance has thrown open the windows of your mind, and now you are compelled to see what lies beyond the horizon. For centuries, your maps have ended at the edge of the great ocean, the coastlines trailing off into imaginative drawings of sea monsters and endless water. But the rediscovery of ancient astronomical texts, combined with a new spirit of empirical inquiry, gives you the tools to challenge this unknown. Your craftsmen create lightweight, portable astrolabes of bronze and wood, allowing a navigator to calculate his latitude from the stars even in mid-flight. The magnetic compass, a closely guarded secret of a few trading guilds, becomes more widely understood. For the first time, you can confidently fly out of sight of land and still know where you are. The ambitious monarchs of the new nation-states, hungry for wealth, prestige, and a strategic advantage over their rivals, begin to sponsor great voyages of exploration. Their motivations are a familiar mix of glory, scientific curiosity, and the insatiable desire to get ridiculously rich. They are all searching for a new wind road to the spice-rich lands of the distant south, one that bypasses the overland routes controlled by their enemies. This race is kicked into a frenzy, by the rediscovery of a single tattered map fragment from the old empire, a chart, like our Piri race map, that seems to impossibly hint at the existence of an entire continent across the Western Ocean. The individuals who lead these expeditions are a new breed of hero, the great navigators. Their courage is almost unimaginable. To fly over the open ocean is a psychological and physical ordeal. There are no mountains to rest on, no thermal updrafts to ride. It is days, sometimes weeks, of non-stop, muscle-shredding flight above a featureless, unforgiving expanse of blue. A miscalculation in food and water supplies is a slow death sentence. The greatest peril of all, your explorers soon discover, is a vast region near the equator known as the Great Calm. It is the doldrums of our world, an enormous belt of windless, dead air where a flyer can become trapped, unable to generate enough lift to proceed, circling helplessly until exhaustion and starvation claim them. Imagine your expedition, weeks into your journey, your supplies nearly gone, your body screaming with fatigue when the lookout's cry goes up, "Land!" As you approach the unknown coastline, you descend through the clouds and see the inhabitants. And they are utterly alien. They are shaped like you, but their bodies are wrong. They are dense, muscular, and they walk upon the ground with an effortless, fluid grace that you, with your awkward shuffling gait, have never known. They have no wings. This is your first contact with Homo sapiens. Ethicists and historians of this era still grapple with the first contact paradox. The initial encounter is one of wonder, fear, and tentative trade. You exchange trinkets for strange new fruits, but the dynamic quickly shifts. You see them as fascinating, but ultimately primitive. They are intelligent, yes, but they are bound to the dirt. They are incomplete lesser beings. This worldview, combined with your immense technological advantages, your iron weapons, your organized military tactics, and your ability to strike from the sky with impunity, is a toxic combination. The contact becomes a conquest. And even more devastating than your weapons are the diseases you carry in your blood. A common sickness from your crowded sky cities, one that might give you a mild fever, rips through their population with apocalyptic force. It is the beginning of the great aerial Columbian exchange. You have discovered a new world, but for the people who already lived there, you are the apocalypse, a host of winged demons who have descended from the heavens to claim their land. In return, your explorers will eventually bring back new crops, maize, potatoes, tobacco, that will forever change the society you left behind. But the age of innocence is over. The world has become both infinitely larger and tragically smaller. While your explorers are conquering new continents and rewriting the map of the world, a quieter but far more explosive revolution is taking place back home. The intellectual ferment of the Renaissance and the vast new wealth flowing in from the colonies have created a society that is prosperous, questioning, and deeply dissatisfied with the old medieval order. All that is needed is a spark, and that spark comes in the form of a new, world-changing technology. It is the printing press. Your version does not come from a Johannes Gutenberg, but from a clever goldsmith who combines several existing technologies. Paper, a rare and expensive commodity imported from the lowland civilizations, a new oil-based ink that will stick to metal, and the crucial innovation of movable, cast metal type. The impact is immediate and staggering. A single scribe, in the scriptorium of a monastery, might take years to copy a single holy book. A printing press can produce hundreds of copies in a week. Information, for the first time in history, is cheap, plentiful, and almost impossible to control. This new technology acts as a catalyst for a massive information cascade, where a new idea can spread from person to person, city to city, with a speed that is simply unstoppable. The first institution to be shaken to its foundations by this new technology is the one that has held power for 1,000 years, the Church of the Sky. It has grown fantastically wealthy, and with that wealth has come corruption. The selling of indulgences, divine blessings that supposedly shorten a soul's time in purgatory, or in your case, guarantee a safe flight or a bountiful harvest, is rampant. A fiery and brilliant priest, your Martin Luther, is consumed with righteous fury at this spiritual decay. He writes a scathing critique, not 95 theses, but perhaps a dozen, hammering them to the door of the great mountain cathedral. His most radical, heretical idea is that the church itself is an unnecessary intermediary. True faith, he argues, is a direct flight of the soul to God. No priest, bishop, or indulgence is required. In a previous age, he would have been swiftly arrested and burned as a heretic. But now, his words are taken down, set in type, and printed on thousands of cheap pamphlets. Smuggled in the cargo nets of sympathetic merchants, they spread throughout the continent in a matter of months. The idea of a personal, direct faith is intoxicating to the masses. Just as our historians debate whether the Protestant Reformation was a primarily religious movement or a political one, your scholars argue the same. Ambitious kings and nobles, long resentful of the Church's power and its vast tax-exempt wealth, see their chance. They protect the reformer, adopt his new theology, and seize the Church's lands and assets for themselves. The world erupts into a century of brutal religious warfare. City fights city, kingdom fights kingdom, in a bloody struggle between the old Catholic faith and the new Reformed one. Radical new sects emerge, like your version of the Anabaptists. Zealous primitivists who preach that true faith demands abandoning the cities entirely and returning to the pure, nomadic life of the Paleolithic cliff nesters. When the smoke finally clears, the old world is gone. The universal unifying power of the Church has been shattered forever. The complex web of feudal loyalties has been burned away in the fires of war. What emerges is the modern nation-state. Your primary identity is no longer as a subject of a local lord or a child of a universal church. You are now a citizen of a country, defined by a common language, a shared culture, and a powerful, centralized government. The medieval world is over. The age of competing nations, mass communication, and ideological conflict has begun. The age of nations, with its constant competition for military and economic supremacy, creates an insatiable appetite for innovation. A new kind of power is needed, one stronger than muscle and more reliable than wind. You find it deep in the earth, in the form of black, combustible rocks, coal. When burned, this coal can heat water into steam, and a few brilliant engineers, your world's equivalent of James Watt, figure out how to harness the immense pressure of that steam to push a piston. They invent the steam engine, a loud, powerful, and ferocious iron heart that will begin to beat in the chest of your civilization, changing it forever. In a flat world, this invention would be put on wheels to create the locomotive. But in your vertical world, its primary application is to defeat gravity. Massive engine houses are constructed at the base of your mountain cities, their great boilers roaring day and night, their smokestacks belching thick, black smoke. From these houses, immense iron cable systems run up the face of the mountain, powered by the chugging pistons of the steam engines. They pull enormous platforms capable of lifting tons of raw materials, coal and iron ore, from the mines below up to the city and sending finished goods back down. The elegant, slow-paced rope and pulley systems of the past are replaced by the brute, industrial force of steam power. This new power source transforms manufacturing. It's no longer efficient for a weaver to work on a single loom in their home. A single steam engine can power 500 looms at once. The factory is born. These are not bright, airy workshops. They are vast, multi-leveled caverns carved into the mountain, filled with the deafening rhythmic thunder of machinery. A single colossal steam engine in the factory's heart drives a forest of spinning belts and turning gears. The air is thick with the dust of cotton or wool fibers and the greasy smell of machine oil. They are dark, dangerous places where a moment of inattention can cost you a limb or your life. This new industrial machine is hungry for labor. You and millions like you are drawn from the countryside, leaving behind the predictable, seasonal life on the farm for the promise of a cash wage in the city. You become a new kind of person, the factory worker. Your life is no longer governed by the rising of the sun, but by the shriek of the factory whistle. You fly through the smog-choked dawn to your station, work a grueling 12-hour shift performing the same repetitive task over and over, and then fly home, exhausted, to your cramped tenement on a lower, less desirable ledge. The cost of this progress is written in the sky. The ceaseless burning of millions of tons of coal pumps a thick, greasy smog into the atmosphere. The air, your sacred ancestral home, becomes a toxic soup. A permanent grey-brown haze hangs over the industrial cities, blotting out the sun. A layer of black soot covers every surface, turning the vibrant stone of your city a uniform, depressing grey. You develop new sicknesses, a persistent smog cough that never leaves you. The chemicals in the smoke mix with the clouds to create acid rain, which poisons your high-altitude farms and slowly eats away at the ancient stone carvings of your ancestors. A backlash emerges. A group of traditional artisans, your version of the Luddites, see these factories as demonic abominations. They lead raids to smash the new machines that have destroyed their livelihoods and poisoned the air. But they cannot stop the tide of progress. Economic historians in your world still debate whether the Industrial Revolution was an inevitable step forward or a catastrophic wrong turn that put your civilization on a darker path. For you, living in the smog, the answer feels grimly obvious. The sky, once the symbol of your freedom, is becoming your cage. The city you now inhabit is a creature of iron and smoke, a sprawling industrial powerhouse carved into the mountain. But the very industry that gives it life is also choking it to death. The smog is a constant, suffocating presence in the lower levels, a source of sickness and misery. For the new class of fabulously wealthy industrialists and financiers, escape is the ultimate luxury. They have the resources to build their way out, to climb above the pollution. All they need is a new material, something stronger and lighter than the cast iron that supports the factories. The breakthrough comes from the roaring heart of the forges. A new technique, your world's version of the Bessemer process, is invented, allowing for the inexpensive mass production of a miraculous new metal: steel. As the science of metallurgy reveals, steel is not merely purified iron. It is iron that has been carefully alloyed with a small, precisely controlled amount of carbon. This simple addition gives it a tensile strength and elasticity that brittle iron could never possess. It is a material that doesn't just resist compression, it can bend and stretch and bear immense loads. It is the perfect skeleton for building into the sky. With steel, your architecture is freed from the constraints of the mountain itself. You stop carving inward and begin building outward, and most dramatically, upward. The age of the cloud scraper begins. Architectural historians of your world still argue about which structure was the first true cloud scraper, but within a few decades, the skyline of every major city is transformed. Immense steel frames, bolted directly into the mountain rock, soar thousands of feet into the air, clad in stone and glass. The old Eyrie, the city of your ancestors, is dwarfed, becoming a mere foundation for the new city that pierces the clouds. These towering structures create the most extreme and visible social stratification soar in your history. The city becomes a perfect physical metaphor for the class system. The wealthy elite abandon the old city entirely. They build their mansions and penthouses on the top floors of the new cloud scrapers, hundreds of stories up, far above the smog layer. They live in a world of perpetual sunshine, clean, thin air, and breathtaking views. They have private landing balconies for their personal flights and are whisked up and down by private steam-powered elevators. Meanwhile, you and the rest of the working class are left below. You live in the dark, cramped lower levels of these same buildings, or in the old districts of the city that are now cast into a permanent artificial twilight by the colossal towers looming above. Your world is the one depicted in the prophetic silent films of our timeline, like Metropolis, a grim underworld of shadows where the air is a thick, toxic soup and a constant greasy rain of soot and industrial waste falls from the gleaming city of the rich far above. Flying in these lower levels is a hazardous affair, a journey through a canyon of steel where the wind is a treacherous, unpredictable draft. The very nature of your city has changed. It is no longer an organic part of the mountain. It is an artificial, geometric forest of steel. The old ideal, a community of flyers living in harmony with the sky, is a dead and forgotten dream. The hierarchy of the ancient Eyrie, where status was measured by how high your ledge was, has been recreated on a terrifying and industrial scale. The freedom of flight, once the trait that defined your entire species, is now just another luxury the rich can enjoy and the poor can only dream of from the smog-choked depths. The new cloud scraper cities act as immense vertical magnets, pulling in millions from the surrounding countryside. The allure of a cash wage, however meager, is a powerful force, emptying the rural areas that have been continuously inhabited for thousands of years. This mass migration creates a host of new and dangerous social problems. The lower levels of the cities become catastrophically overcrowded. Entire families are crammed into single, lightless, unventilated rooms in the foundations of the great towers. Basic sanitation, a simple matter of pushing waste over a ledge in a small village, becomes a critical and unsolved crisis in a city of millions. The combination of overcrowding, malnutrition, and poor sanitation turns these lower districts into breeding grounds for diseases like cholera and tuberculosis, which sweep through the population in devastating waves. Yet between the unimaginable wealth of the penthouse dwellers and the desperate poverty of the factory workers, a new class of people is forming. This is the middle class. They are the managers who oversee the factory floors, the engineers who design the new steel structures, the accountants who track the flow of capital, and the bureaucrats who run the machinery of the state. You might be one of them. Your life is comfortable, if not luxurious. You can afford a small but clean apartment, perhaps midway up one of the towers, high enough to escape the worst of the smog, but far from the sunlit peaks of the truly wealthy. You enjoy a degree of security, but it is a precarious one. You are caught in the middle, politically and socially, between the industrialists you serve and the growing restless mass of the working class below, a class you fear you could fall into with a single misstep. It is from this desperate lower world that the most radical and powerful new ideas emerge. In the taverns and union halls of the smoggy depths, thinkers and activists, your versions of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, begin to articulate a powerful critique of this new industrial society. They argue that the wealth of the city is built on the exploited labor of the working class, who see none of the profits. They dream of a different world, one where the workers themselves own the factories, where wealth is distributed equally, and where no one lives in a penthouse while others starve in the foundations. The ideas of socialism and communism spread like fire through the lower levels, offering a glimmer of hope in a world of grim exploitation. These new ideologies give a powerful voice to the growing labor movement. Workers begin to organize themselves into unions to demand better wages, safer working conditions, and shorter hours. The primary weapon in their arsenal is the strike. The sight of thousands of workers refusing to fly to the factories, instead gathering in vast, angry swarms in the netted plazas, is a terrifying one for the ruling class. These strikes often turn violent, met with brutal force by the private security armies of the factory owners or the official city guard. The city becomes a battleground of competing classes and ideologies. Sociologists in your world, much like Emil Durkheim in ours, study this new urban environment, coining terms like anomie to describe the feeling of rootlessness and social disconnection experienced by the millions who have been torn from their traditional rural lives and thrown into the anonymous, chaotic heart of the industrial machine. It is a society of incredible technological power, but it is deeply, dangerously unwell. The immense tensions of class conflict and social unrest roiling within your industrial nation cannot be contained forever. So your leaders do what leaders have always done. They redirect that anger outwards. A new, fervent and aggressive nationalism sweeps the continent. The factory worker in the smoggy depths and the banker in his sunlit penthouse are told that they are brothers, united by a common language, a shared culture, and, most importantly, a common enemy. The great industrial nations, having largely finished colonizing the New World, now turn on each other in a ferocious competition for global resources and imperial dominance. A complex and brittle web of alliances ensures that any small spark will ignite the entire continent. Historians of your world, just like ours, debate the inevitability of the Great War, but when it finally comes, it is a cataclysm that beggars belief. The romantic, chivalrous ideal of the Sky Knight is incinerated in the first few weeks of the conflict. This is a new kind of war, an anonymous industrial-scale process of extermination. The defining weapon of this new age is the machine gun. Placed in fortified nests, a single water-cooled machine gun can command a vast field of fire, spitting out hundreds of rounds a minute. Entire squadrons of your nation's finest young flyers, charging forward in brave but suicidal formations, are simply shredded, mown out of the sky in moments. Individual skill and courage have been rendered meaningless by the mathematics of firepower. In the early months, the propaganda machines celebrate individual aces, your versions of the Red Baron, who rack up impressive kill counts in one-on-one dogfights. But this is a brief, romantic illusion. The reality of the war is a grim, attritional stalemate, an aerial version of trench warfare where waves of flyers are sent to their deaths against impregnable defensive positions. Then, the scientists of war unleash a new and uniquely monstrous weapon: poison gas. Based on the simple scientific principle that gases like chlorine and phosgene are denser than air, your armies develop shells that release the gas high up on an enemy city's cliff face. The greenish-yellow cloud does not dissipate. It flows downwards, a silent, toxic waterfall that seeps into the ventilation shafts and open windows of the lower levels. It is a weapon that is physically incapable of harming the rich in their high penthouses, but which brings a horrific, choking death to tens of thousands of civilians in the poor, overcrowded districts below. But the most profound and terrifying innovation of the Great War is the birth of mechanical flight. Engineers, using the new internal combustion engine, create the first airplanes, or bombers. These are not living things. They are machines of wood, fabric, and steel. They can fly higher and faster than any winged human, into the thin, cold air where you cannot follow. They feel no exhaustion and know no fear. And they can carry a payload of dozens of high-explosive bombs. For you, on the ground, the experience is one of absolute helplessness. It begins with a faint, high-pitched drone from the stratosphere, an alien sound you cannot identify. Then comes the terrifying, high-arcing whistle of the falling bombs. The ensuing explosions are a cataclysm unlike any you have ever known, powerful enough to shatter the steel skeletons of your cloud scrapers and send entire districts plunging into the abyss. The war is no longer something that happens between armies on a distant front. It has come home. The bomber has made it possible to terrorize and slaughter civilians with impunity from an untouchable height, changing the face of warfare forever. The Great War leaves your world shattered, exhausted, and cynical. The old empires that began the conflict are either defeated or mortally wounded. Out of this global wreckage, two victorious nations rise to become the world's superpowers. They are fundamentally opposed in their ideologies, one championing a system of individual enterprise and free markets, the other a collective society where the state controls all aspects of life. The stage is set for a new kind of global conflict. The scientific arms race that produced the first bombers continues in secret, culminating in the creation of the ultimate weapon. Physicists working on a top-secret project unlock the power hidden within the atom itself. They master the science of nuclear fission, learning how to split the nucleus of a uranium atom to release a quantity of energy dictated by Einstein's famous equation E equals mc squared. 2. The result is the atomic bomb. In a world of flat cities, it is a weapon of horrific, city-ending power. In your vertical world, it is something more. A weapon of geological terror. A single well-placed nuclear device can not only vaporize the city on the surface, but can also shatter the very bedrock of the mountain itself, causing the entire billion-ton structure to collapse into a cloud of radioactive dust. After a second, even more devastating Great War concludes with 2 of these bombs being used. The new reality becomes terrifyingly clear. Both superpowers now possess this mountain-shattering capability. Direct war between them is no longer a possibility. It is a suicide pact. And so begins the Cold War, a tense 50-year global standoff. It is a war fought not with charging armies, but through proxies on distant continents, through technological competition in a race to the stars, through espionage, and through relentless propaganda. The peace of your world is now maintained by a terrifying doctrine known as assured aerial annihilation, your version of our mutually assured destruction. Political scientists in your world still debate whether this was a brilliant peacekeeping strategy or a form of collective, institutionalized madness. The logic is simple. If either side launches its atomic weapons, the other side will detect the launch and retaliate before the first bombs even land. The result would be the utter obliteration of both civilizations. Your world is held hostage by the threat of its own ingenuity. This balance of terror creates a culture of deep-seated paranoia and fear. Schoolchildren practice futile flash drills, learning to tuck their wings over their heads to shield themselves from the thermal blast of a nuclear detonation. You live with a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, a background awareness that your entire world, your beautiful mountain city and everyone in it, could be erased in a single blinding flash. The world is physically divided. A heavily fortified border, your version of the Iron Curtain, descends across the continent. You call it the Sky Curtain. It is a line on the map that has been made terrifyingly real. A militarized zone bristling with anti-aircraft batteries, early warning radar stations, and ceaseless patrols of high-speed mechanical fighter jets. To fly into this airspace is to be shot down without warning. The only way to breach the curtain is through espionage. Daring spies attempt covert crossings under the cover of darkness, while a new generation of high-altitude spy planes, and later satellites, begin to fly in the darkness above the sky, capturing grainy photographs of the enemy's missile silos and bomber bases. It is a world technically at peace, but it is a peace without comfort, a silent, global staring contest where the first to blink brings about the end of the world. The Cold War ends not with a bang, but with a whimper, as one of the two superpowers collapses under the weight of its own economic and political contradictions. The Sky Curtain is torn down, and for the first time in a generation, the world is not defined by two opposing blocks. Into this new, unified global space, a revolutionary technology emerges that will connect your world in a way that even the ancient empires could not have dreamed of. The microchip and the vast, interconnected network it makes possible, the Internet. This is the dawn of the information age. A single, hair-thin fiber optic cable, strung between the great mountain cities, can carry more information than all the woven libraries of the ancient world combined. Financial transactions that once took weeks to confirm via messenger now happen in a nanosecond. This instantaneous flow of information and capital fuels a new era of globalization. The economies of the world become deeply, inextricably linked. Giant multinational corporations with headquarters in one nation, factories in another, and markets in all of them become fantastically powerful, sometimes wielding more influence than the governments of the nations they operate in. Your daily life is transformed. You carry a personal communication device, a sleek pane of glass and metal that gives you access to the entirety of human knowledge and allows you to speak with someone on the other side of the planet as if they were on the next ledge. The grim, monolithic cloud scrapers of the industrial age are now covered in vibrant, flashing digital billboards, turning the nighttime city into a dazzling and distracting canyon of light. A globalized culture emerges. You listen to music, watch movies, and follow fashion trends that are nearly identical whether you live in the mountain cities of the East or the West. This cultural homogenization, however, provokes a backlash. Many feel that their unique, local traditions, arts, and languages are being erased by this tide of global media, leading to a resurgence of nationalist and traditionalist movements. Perhaps the most complex challenge of this new era is managing the sky itself. With a global population of billions, the airspace around major cities is dangerously crowded. The old system of simply looking where you're going is no longer viable. This leads to the creation of a vast, complex, and automated air traffic control system. Using GPS satellites and networked computers, the sky is digitally divided into invisible sky lanes. When you fly to work, you are no longer free to choose your own path. Your personal device logs you into the network, which assigns you a specific altitude and route, a digital corridor you must follow. Your flight is constantly tracked, your speed and position monitored by an algorithm to prevent mid-air collisions. This system is a technological marvel and a profound philosophical shift. For the first time in your species' history, your defining act, the freedom of flight, is being regulated, managed, and constrained by a machine. Political theorists in your world, much like Shoshana Zuboff, who coined the term surveillance capitalism in ours, begin to write about the dangers of this new system, where every movement is tracked, logged, and potentially monetized. The sky, once a symbol of boundless, chaotic freedom, has become a grid of ordered, efficient, and constantly monitored digital pathways. You are safer than you have ever been, but many of you can't help but feel that something essential has been lost. Your civilization has mastered the planet. Your digital networks connect every city, your economies are intertwined, and your regulated sky lanes have brought an end to the chaos of the open air. Having conquered your own world, you turn your gaze to the last remaining frontier, the vast, silent emptiness of space. A new space race begins, fueled by the familiar mix of national pride, scientific curiosity, and military ambition. You launch your first satellites, your version of Sputnik, beeping triumphantly from the void. You dream of flying to the moon, of planting your footprint on its gray dust. And then you hit a wall, a biological wall. In your early experiments with rocketry, you discover a horrifying and deeply ironic truth. Your own body is the problem. Your entire physiology, so perfectly and exquisitely adapted for life in Earth's atmosphere, is profoundly, fatally ill-suited for leaving it. The science is brutal and uncompromising. Your light, hollow, bird-like bones, which grant you the gift of flight, are too fragile to withstand the crushing G-forces of a rocket launch. Your hyper-efficient flow-through lungs, designed to extract oxygen from atmospheric pressure, fail catastrophically in the pure oxygen environment of a capsule. You are a species designed to soar at 10,000 feet, not to be blasted into orbit on a pillar of controlled fire. The very wings that made you masters of the world have become the bars of a planetary cage. This discovery leads to a deeply controversial and, for many, humiliating solution. On a few isolated continents and remote islands, small populations of the old, flightless Homo sapiens have survived the ages, living in primitive, unindustrialized tribes. For centuries, you have treated them as living curiosities, a lesser branch of humanity that never received the gift of flight. But your scientists now realize that their so-called primitive biology Their dense, solid bones and robust, simple lungs makes them uniquely qualified to survive a rocket launch. And so, the first person to leave your atmosphere, your Yuri Gagarin, is not a winged hero from one of the great sky cities, but a ground walker from a forgotten corner of the world. The cultural shock is immense, triggering a profound identity crisis. Sociologists and biologists in your world engage in a fierce debate known as the gravity paradox. Who is the more advanced species, the one who mastered the planet's sky, or the one whose humble, durable body allows them to reach for the stars? While the debate rages, the space program, crewed by these gravity specialists, moves forward. Probes are sent to the other planets. A giant radio telescope listening to the cosmos picks up a strange, structured, and completely inexplicable transmission from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. Your wow signal, a tantalizing hint that you are not alone, and a powerful new incentive to get out there. The first orbital space stations are constructed, vast, complex structures. But for any of your own scientists who visit, they are psychological torture chambers. For a species born to the infinite expanse of the open sky, the sealed, claustrophobic environment of a space station is a prison. The recycled air is stale and dead, lacking the familiar texture of the wind. There is no room to stretch your wings, an almost unbearable physical and mental constraint. The stations must be built as giant rotating rings to create artificial gravity, without which your body, adapted to the constant stress of flight, would simply waste away. You find yourself in a humbling position. You can look down upon your world from a godlike height, but you are trapped in a sterile metal can, utterly dependent on the flightless people you once pitied. You have reached the final frontier, only to discover it was not built for you. Your species stands at a profound crossroads. The path to the stars is blocked by the limitations of your own body, the very form that gave you mastery over the Earth. For a civilization that has conquered engineering, physics, and information, the solution is as logical as it is terrifying. If the biology is the problem, you must change the biology. The great defining project of this new century becomes the complete mastery of the human genome. Scientists, building on the breakthroughs of the information age, develop a revolutionary technology, a form of genetic editing far more advanced than the early CRISPR systems of our timeline. It functions like a biological word processor, allowing them to search for a specific genetic sequence in a living cell, cut it out with molecular scissors, and replace it with a new, desired sequence. Using this incredible tool, they begin the methodical process of designing a human capable of surviving beyond the atmosphere. They find and reactivate the ancestral genes for dense, solid bones. They copy genes for radiation resistance from extremophile bacteria. They completely re-engineer the respiratory system, designing lungs that can tolerate a pure oxygen environment and interface directly with life support systems. This godlike power ignites the most ferocious and divisive debate in your history. Bioethicists, politicians, and priests grapple with a single, monumental question. What does it mean to be human? On one side are the naturals, who argue that this path is a monstrous betrayal of your heritage. They believe that your wings and your connection to the sky are the very essence of your identity. To them, deliberately engineering a human without wings is an act of self-mutilation, a spiritual suicide. On the other side are the progressives, who argue that evolution has always been about change and adaptation, and that this is simply the next logical, self-directed step. They contend that clinging to a planetary existence out of nostalgia is a failure of nerve, and that humanity's true destiny is written in the stars, not in the air. The debate becomes a real-world version of the Ship of Theseus paradox. If you systematically replace every part of a human that makes them who they are, their bones, their lungs, even their wings, is the creature that remains still human? While the debate rages, the work continues in the sterile orbital laboratories high above the Earth. The first genetically enhanced children are brought into existence. These are the first members of a new species, Homo spatius, or star flyer. They are born and raised in the artificial gravity of space stations. They are visibly different from you, shorter, stockier, with a bone and muscle density that would make flight impossible. Some are even born entirely without wings, their shoulder structure and arm musculature redesigned for dexterity in zero gravity, rather than for powered flight. These children are the future, but they are a future that is fundamentally alien to you. They have never felt the wind rush past their face in a high-speed dive. They have never known the communal warmth of a cliffside eyrie. Their sky is not a blue expanse of clouds and air currents, but a black, star-dusted void, viewed through the reinforced glass of a viewport. A profound and unbridgeable psychological gap separates them from their earthbound creators. You have finally found a way to break free from your atmospheric prison. But the cost was shattering. To reach for the stars, you had to let go of the sky. The future belongs not to the winged human who conquered the world, but to their strange, star-born children. Centuries pass. From your vantage point on Earth, you watch as your descendants, the star-born Homo spatius, begin their slow but inexorable expansion into the solar system. The schism between your two species is now a permanent fact of life. You are the past, the keepers of the ancestral home. They are the future, the pioneers of the void. Their civilization, no longer tied to the gravity of a single world, begins to bloom in 1,000 different forms. The first great off-world colony takes root on Mars. They don't build on the exposed, irradiated surface. Instead, they colonize the vast, natural lava tubes that form immense, continent-spanning caverns beneath the red dust, a scientific reality that provides perfect shielding from the harshness of space. A new, uniquely Martian culture develops in these subterranean cities, a society of engineers and scientists engaged in the colossal, multi-generational project of terraforming their new world. Further out, a rugged and fiercely independent culture of miners emerges in the asteroid belt, hopping from rock to rock in their small spacecraft, harvesting the ice and metals that are the building blocks of this new solar economy. And in the remote, beautiful twilight of the outer system, small, isolated research outposts are established on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, their inhabitants dedicated to pure knowledge. But the ancestral dream of flight is too deep, too fundamental to be forgotten. It is lovingly and deliberately recreated. On Mars and on the Moon, they build colossal pressurized domes, vast open spaces miles high and miles wide. Inside these domes, the low gravity, 1/3 of Earth's on Mars, 1/6 on the Moon, changes everything. Here, even you, a natural Homo alatus, could leap into the air and soar with just a gentle push of your wings. For the wingless star flyers, they engineer sophisticated mechanical wings, and flight becomes the most cherished of recreational activities. It is an art form, a competitive sport, a way to connect with the heritage of a planet most of them will never visit. The most popular entertainment in the solar system is the broadcast of the Martian Skyball Leagues, where graceful winged athletes dance through the low-gravity air. The very focus of human civilization shifts. The old earthbound rivalries between nations, which once seemed so important, now feel impossibly petty and distant. The new challenges, the new frontiers, are on a solar scale. The great unifying project of your descendants is the terraforming of Mars, the slow, millennial-long process of giving it an atmosphere, oceans, and open, breathable skies. Humanity, now a multi-planetary species, also recognizes its shared vulnerability and establishes a planetary defense system to track and deflect any asteroids that might threaten either of its home worlds. And the memory of that strange, patterned signal from the stars is never forgotten. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence becomes a grand, system-wide obsession. The old wind roads between your mountain cities have become the star lanes, the invisible trade routes plied by fusion-powered ships. Futurists and sociologists of this new era now debate what the next great filter for humanity might be. In overcoming your biological prison, you passed a crucial evolutionary test that many civilizations may fail. Now, your star-faring children look towards even more distant, almost mythical goals, like the construction of a Dyson sphere, and face the silent, star-dusted infinity, ready for whatever challenges the galaxy may hold. And so, your long journey through this other history comes to a quiet end. You look back from a future you could never have imagined and see the unbroken thread that connects a star-faring descendant to a terrified hominin clinging to a cliff face. In our world, the great turning point was the cognitive revolution when the minds of Homo sapiens caught fire. In your world, it was the flight revolution, a biological gamble that reshaped your body, your mind, and your destiny. Every unique feature of your history, your cliffside cities, your sky-centric religions, your aerial combat, your cloud-scraper metropolises, grew from the seed of that single, radical adaptation. The ultimate lesson of your history is the great paradox of freedom. It is a perfect, if brutal, example of an evolutionary trade-off. The principle that adapting to one environment makes you less suited for another. In gaining the ultimate freedom of the sky, you bound yourself to your planet's atmosphere with chains of biology far stronger than the simple pull of gravity that held the ground dwellers. Your greatest gift was also your most profound limitation, a planetary cage with the most beautiful sky-blue bars imaginable. But even across the vast, silent distances of space and the gulf of centuries, the echo of that gift remains. Your star-born descendants, who have never felt the wind, carry its ghost in their culture, and perhaps even in their genes, a form of ancestral memory that whispers of a lost world. In the zero-gravity playrooms of Martian lava tube cities, children's games still mimic the ancient swoop of the hunt. The most popular virtual reality simulations are not of alien worlds, but of what it felt like to soar over the green hills and blue oceans of Earth, the lost paradise. Their most haunting music is filled with a deep and poignant longing for the feeling of sun on a wing, a sensation none of them have ever known. And so, the great unanswerable question that your philosophers are left with is this: was it worth it? Was the glory of 1,000,000 years of flight worth the price of the cage it built? Was the final desperate leap to the stars worth the sacrifice of the very thing that made you you? There is no answer, of course. There is only the long, strange, beautiful, and tragic story of your flight. And now, the journey is over. The great, sweeping questions of evolution and destiny can fade into the background, their echoes softening into a gentle hum. Let the grand images of star lanes and cloud scraper cities dissolve, leaving only the quiet darkness of your own room and the comfortable weight of your own stillness. There are no treacherous winds here, no 1,000-foot drops, only the gentle and predictable rhythm of your own breathing. The story is told, the great flight is finished, and all that is left is to simply rest. So just let that feeling of calm settle over you, a soft and quiet blanket. Allow your thoughts to drift, to become as light and as effortless as a single feather, floating on a warm summer updraft. Let the soft background sounds of your room be the only wind you hear, a gentle current carrying you now towards a deep and peaceful sleep. There are no more mountains to climb, no more skies to conquer. There is only this moment, this quiet, and this rest.